application at no cost to the township. And this is again in regards to Safe Streets Transit as well as this is the fourth one here. It should be Safe Streets, and it should also be that's fine. Then you read it for the other one. So that's fine then.
Okay. Action.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Mr. Bowden?
Yes.
Mr. Brown?
Yes.
Mr. DeFalco?
Yes.
Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Mr. Dow?
Yes.
Excuse me, Mr. Mayor, I'd like to walk one on for this evening. It's the best practices resolution that's not included here, but we need to pass that tonight.
Yeah, I actually was going to be on here, and I was wondering, okay, so that would be resolution what then?
It's not a resolution, we just have to approve it.
Oh, just approve it.
We have to approve we received it, or we have to approve we believe it?
That's up to you.
Because I got some questions.
Do we want to discuss it, or do we want to go straight to action?
No, we better do action.
I think I know what it is. I think I know what it is.
If we discuss it, we'll never get out of here.
Differences of opinion.
Exactly.
Okay, so do I have action on this? Action to approve. Motion to approve. Motion to approve by Mr. DeFalco. Do I have a second?
I'll second it.
Roll call, please.
Mr. Bowden?
Yes.
Mr. Brown?
Yes.
Mr. DeFalco?
Yes.
Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Mr. Dow?
No. I don't want to, excuse me, Ms. Vicki?
Yes.
Regarding resolution from DEP, they provide, we had a copy of the correspondence to it, the passing resolution. Because they were waiting for the passing of resolution. Do you have a copy of who we're supposed to go to after we pass it tonight?
After we pass it now, I would usually, when I do these grants, I scan it in and then they'll pick up the original.
Okay, then I'll just touch base with you tomorrow with the
Yeah,
information.
I did put, copies in Richard's, folder for him to sign tonight too
Okay.
as well, so that I can have them ready for
Okay.
tomorrow.
Okay, thanks. Okay. Alright, we have a list of topics of discussion today, as far as the work session goes, and the first one up is the solar ordinance.
Excuse me, Mayor Joe. I had made future plans with my rec department that I work with, and I was just going to be the motions that were being brought forth to vote on.
Oh, okay.
So I'm just asking to be excused for that.
With the record reflected, Councilman Brown has some recreational duty to attend to.
And if you need me for anything, 5 minutes away.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, thank you.
Everyone tonight?
Thank you.
Alright, so we have the solar ordinance once again here, and I have some things I highlighted on it. Do you guys want to have anything to discuss on it, or you want me to lead on it? Got a fairly substantial checklist today.
Go ahead, you probably cover all the ones that we discussed before.
Okay, do you have the ordinance in front of you?
Yes, I do.
Alright. 3, just on the first page, on the whereas 3, the solar energy systems enhance the reliability and quality of the power grid. Enhance the reliability and quality of the power grid. I think that's I guess you're getting this from some other ordinance that's already been made up, but enhance the reliability and the quality of the power grid is, I think, it could be removed out of there, and it's just nonsense talk.
Okay.
You guys agree? How would it enhance the reliability and the quality? That was my first, and number 4, the entire number 4. I mean, why make these things longer and more complicated than they are? Solar systems make the electricity supply market more competitive by promoting customer choice. you can't go to a standalone, this is, we're talking about, accessory and generation that is impossible to stand alone. So I don't think it really fits. 5 and 6 are the keys, and, I was questioning, substantially increase the time and cost associated with the approval of such systems. So this ordinance is designed to, it should be substantially,
Decrease.
Oh, I
decrease,
see, okay,
right?
that was just a typo.
Right, so we want to substantially decrease the time and cost associated. And I'd like to just ask if that isn't some legalese for what we're really meaning to say, which is, make it easier for residential homeowners. That's
it.
basically the.
That's what I was going for, I think.
Right, make it easier for residential homeowners, and that's probably the closest you could actually state that, right? By saying substantially decrease the time. All right, so, that would be that. Going to page 2, purpose of ordinance, line 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and agricultural businesses. Well, I don't think we have really agricultural businesses. I think if we deleted agriculture and it just said businesses, straight to businesses, I think that might be put more out into the country a little bit. Next would be appearance rules. That's a building service requirement. Page 4, 3.5. All new electrical transmission lines associated with the installation of a solar energy system shall be located underground unless the local electric public utility requires they be installed on existing utility poles. That what do you think, Jason? You're an electrician. This thing is saying that it has to be buried service, so,
Well, unless the public utility already has poles there, we're still probably saying go to the poles, we're not spending money for underground.
well, they don't pay for it, the customer pays for the buried service, period. So the public service company is gonna say, do whatever your ordinance says, we don't, it has no effect on them. It's a drop, it's a cut, and that's it. So, same as any other, Bell or any of the other utilities, you bring it there anyway, you're told to bring it there, and this basically is telling them to bring it there, so you're asking the PSE&G in this case to give a waiver when I just went through hell getting my buried service in. They sent an engineer out, they didn't even want me to go to buried service, so, but just to talk to them, this is the exact opposite here, because now you're coming to them with a document saying that they need to give you a waiver to exempt this thing from being located underground. So again,
Do you think that this is for ground-mounted systems that may be in your backyard, and then from that ground-mounted system,
That's the way
but it's under general provisions.
I know.
So if it was to be that, if that was to stand, then you'd probably want to move it to under 5.3 ground-mounted systems.
Yeah.
And put it in the.
That's the way I interpreted that it was a ground mounted service. If you use your rooftop, you're not going to be able to run it all the way underground and then back up.
Unless your service was
Well,
already.
you're basically telling the homeowner that they now have to bury their service drop to their house.
Well,
Think about it, right?
Well, only.
You're not, when you install these, you're not messing with the service drop itself.
No, not at all.
So with this being in there, I wasn't taking it as being the service drop. I was taking it from the existing to the solar array. That's the way I was looking at it, because you don't mess with the service coming into your house.
For example,
Yeah, you're
It's
right.
from
like,
the,
Right.
like I've seen people have a carriage house or something, they install solar panels on it. I'm sure that they're not putting a pole in their backyard to go from the roof of their carriage house to meet the pole where their drop is right now. They'll bury it in their yard, run it all the way to the service drop, and then tie it in to the grid over there.
And I would require, I think that that's a sensible requirement. If you're doing a ground mounted, or if you're doing an accessory building, that you're putting these panels on, and then to get from there to your service drop, which is gonna be controlled by the utility company, and that's where the second line of this comes in, then I would think that we would want those things to go underneath the ground and not being stretched across people's yards.
Well, we
like
definitely do
clotheslines.
want it to go underground in the case of ground mount and in the case of the accessory building.
So-
But it's just the location of this
So
being
to take it
here.
a step further, that because you have to do this hand in hand with the utility service that provides your electric, that if it is already overhead, which comes from the pole to your house, that's where this transmission goes back to the grid, is overhead through the same wires.
Right. Well, it-
So your meter actually just reverses and
Reverses,
starts
it's a- yeah,
sensing
it's a
that.
reverse- it's a
So
reverse.
you're not gonna have any control over that wire. And so you can't say to PSE&G, my township is now, based on this ordinance, required that you take that off, come down and go underneath the ground. We will have no control over that.
Well,
And this will not
Well,
force
if-
that.
If you have a solar field, since this is under general provisions, if you have a solar field, so under the commercial application, you wouldn't have a house with a service. Something like over there off of,
Then this would
Oxley
cover
Road.
right, then this would cover the
You know.
underground where you would want that.
But what I'm saying is that always have that, and they may, wanna run poles. You may be too far back into the woods. The expense, is up there to go underground in comparison to above ground. If you're going 16 poles back, if you're going any kind of distance into a
I think it
field,
would be cheaper to go
you know.
underground at that point.
Think so?
Oh, yeah, than to put poles and.
Poles are expensive.
Yeah, well, it depends on the contract that you have. There's all kinds of requirements to going underground. You have to have it inspected.
But
You don't have a pole inspector,
I've never,
so.
I've never actually had any inspections done on any poles. We drop a pole in and no one knows the better, but I guess just the placement of it, if we keep it, if we move it to underground mount.
Well, I don't know that we wanna just do it on ground mount, cause if we have an accessory
Yeah,
building.
I think it needs to be generalistic, but more in depth to specify if it's an accessory
Well, if you
building,
want
like you
to-
said, or is it
if
a
you
ground
want to-
mount system.
Okay, yeah, or add language to it where it specifies this for ground mount system or accessory building.
Well, you heard us talk about it, I think you can translate
Something
that
like
into
that, yeah.
3.5.
Number 3.7 is saying that it's calling for engineered drawings and structural analysis prepared by licensed professional engineer or architect verifying the structural integrity of the roof system following installation. Wouldn't that be prior to installation?
It's
Well-
required by code that before any rooftop installation is installed by the state, and they have to have an engineer come out and assess the.
Prior, right?
Prior to
Right.
the installation.
This is saying following installation,
Well-
so it should say prior.
No. What it's saying is that right now, as your roof sits, it's the code. If you add an accessory to your roof, post that accessory, it still has to meet the code and be structurally sound. So it's saying that it could be structurally sound before. The system itself, once it's completed,
Right.
still has to be structurally sound. So that's what it's saying. It's saying that the post-installation has to be approved by an architect or structural engineer.
But the roof has to be approved by architect before any electrical and company can come in and install an array on your roof.
That's correct, but the roof is there. This is an as-built that's done that says, now that we've installed the panels, these panels are gonna be installed, to get the permit, it's gonna have to be done prior to. But it has to prove that once it's installed, it will still be structurally sound. Still be structurally sound once it's done.
But wouldn't the engineer that's reviewing it, wouldn't it be all in the same? I mean, he's gonna review if that roof can hold that weight.
I would say if we were gonna make any modifications to 3.7, following, should say, of the roof system prior and following installation, because that covers the integrity of the roof prior to being put on, which is required by code, and it also looks at, make sure that the equipment once put on the roof is not inhibiting the roof in any way, being non-functional or compliant after it's been installed.
You can be redundant, but yeah, basically that would cover it. But the way that, this was, again, the way it was written, it was meant to say, in order for you to even get the permit, the architectural drawings are gonna have to be done prior to the installation. They will not give you a permit unless the architectural drawings are completed and handed in. Then you're gonna get your permit. And what they are stating at that point is that once it's completed, it's no different than you building a house. You build a house, you have a set of drawings, you submit those set of drawings, okay, then the house is built. And what it's saying is, once the house is built to those drawings, then it's structurally sound.
Well, if that's the case, then if you read the first line, it's saying, at the sole discretion of the Mount Holly Township Code Enforcement Agency. So it's saying that what we've been talking about, the code enforcement officer can say you don't need to bother.
And he would probably not do that. I know well, anybody would not do that. They wouldn't put their license on the line.
But
They tell you
but-
that you don't need it.
You know, but prior to this, you know, prior to, you know, the last couple of sentences, we were saying that it's a state requirement, and now here it says right here, it's the sole discretion of Mount Holly Code
Well,
Enforcement.
But then moving on to 3.8, the first sentence says,
And that should be construction.
Construction official.
Construction official, not code.
where?
Mount Holly.
Mount Holly Township.
And the next one says
3.7.
construction, right?
Mount Holly Township Code Enforcement Agency should be construction
Okay.
official. Engineer drawings detailed. Well,
So in order to get the construction permit, you need to make sure that you're in conformance with all these codes.
Well, that 3.8 gives you the ability for the code officer to basically waive going before the planning board, because that's what that says. Officials shall direct the applicant to file a site plan or variance application with the reviewing board having jurisdiction if their opinion is the installation of solar system does not satisfy the provisions of this section. So, again, we have the construction official in both 3.7 and 3.8 having the overall authority to push the thing forward, which I was pleased that they had the ability, because this is, I think, what we wanted to have in place so that a residential application wouldn't have to go through the planning board. So this was the key piece I think we all wanted to make this residential friendly, is this 3.8. But again, you know, I'm just looking over it and just looking for, you know, clear.
well, the township,
language.
again, that should be township construction
Mhm.
official, or I don't know if you're saying zoning official in this particular case, but it's either zoning or
It
construction.
has to be the person that is going to pass the permit. Let me give you an example. I'm having it done at my house right now, and it's done in the phases, but it's done through the construction code. Because my inspector can only come certain days a week, they can't continue with the other framing until he comes and inspects. So there's a 3-phase. Like right now, I have the racks on, but nothing else can be done.
Just the rough end.
Right, until it's inspected, but it'll be through the construction code also. And I was assuming when I read this was very similar to what we were going to do here, so.
Well, again, I'm not an expert on this, so I'm looking at following, and I would think it would be prior, so that, you know, the roof can hold it before you put the stuff on it. Seems like it's a no-brainer, but when I read that the code or the construction official can waive those requirements, although we've said here tonight that the state has requirements.
State requirements,
You
so I
know,
don't know if
so.
we really need to put it in there, because
At all,
it's
right.
gonna have to be done regardless, because no qualified electrician's gonna touch it without having it.
So this sounds right then for you.
To me.
Just as long as you're using the construction.
Yeah, minus code enforcement.
Okay, that's fine, yeah, I can just,
And under 310, D, a study prepared by a qualified individual. Well, in these past, you know, paragraphs, we've called it out, you know, architect, engineer, you know, what's the qualified individual, what would that person be? We've had this in the past with like a tree ordinance that we have, and a grass cutter can scribble on his grass receipt, you know, his lawn cutting receipt, that the tree is healthy. There's no requirement that the person, there's no qualification requirements on who writes that in that particular case, and I just went through that. So I'm just wondering you know, if that's a little vague, qualified.
So you're asking for a definition of qualified
Yeah,
individual,
I-
or the keys, or
would
is
it be-
it qualified individual?
Well, we say architect, engineer, I guess, the same as the
Well,
other. Okay?
Well,
I think you should stay,
qualified engineer,
yeah,
or
you should
qualified.
stay consistent in what you're talking about, so it's the same way all the time.
Right. Previously, we were saying, you know, we're mentioning architect and engineer, by title. So I would think that we would wanna have the profession that's, you know, so that we don't have somebody being able to say, hey, this guy's qualified, well, what's his
Right, but
qualification?
wouldn't, but based on D, the qualified individual, wouldn't that be situation dependent? So if you're putting it in a historic area where a house next door isn't like that because it takes it historic, I assume the qualified individual would be some historic preservation person that could talk about it.
You
Well,
gotta stay to what the intent is.
Right.
And the intent is any applicant proposing to develop a principal solar energy facility with the primary purpose of selling back to the grid.
So this is for power
to a-
generation requirements.
Exactly. So what that's gonna say
This
is
whole
that
thing through 10.
somebody's gonna have to come in and say that because we're allowing them to put this array in the parking lot of this, or on top of a school, or on top of
Yeah.
something, that it's gonna.
Children's home.
Right, it's gonna benefit, is
They're
gonna
not getting-
outweigh the detriment. So
They're
that's
not
gonna-
getting the power they were supposed to get?
No, they're
Oh.
getting the power, but they're not. They get the lower end of their electric bill, but they're not making the money back.
Nobody is, because the S-RAC's is shot.
Well, that's right,
But
now
again,
shop.
without going all over the place, we do need to have a
And I think that qualified individual is going to be, when you talk about an array, like when we heard the plan,
Right.
when the children's home came before, they had an attorney, that attorney came in, swore that individual in as a qualified individual.
Our attorney actually.
Right, and then they spoke to, as an expert, and qualified as an expert, that this field will be more of a benefit than a detriment. And that's what this is talking about, that somebody's gonna have to come in and say, once you allow them to build this, that it's gonna be more beneficial than it's gonna be detrimental. And if we put that, we can't put that on Tom Casey's shoulders,
Right.
we can't put that on any city
But
official's shoulders.
But you're saying we don't need to name what they're,
No,
what
because they could bring in an engineer, they could bring in
An
a
architect.
solar, they could bring in an architect, they could bring in a solar specialist, they
I
could
could-
bring in an electrician.
I could add something like as determined by the council.
Well,
No.
Well, how about just
No,
qualified?
Because then
How about-
then every application has to come by us.
Instead
to
of
approve.
individual, how about just put professional? Qualified professional, that
Well,
kinda
right.
indicates that it's their, you know, that's their
But
profession.
doesn't by nature of the planning and zoning board, when an application is heard, it has to go and show the positive, negative criteria anyway, which is defining anyway?
Only if it's a use variance, I believe. Only if it's a use variance.
I just know that, you know, I just know this from the issue that I gave you, that we have a situation where anyone can, or, you know, you have a tree that's dead, it's clearly, you know, a hazard to people, and the owner of the property gets a note from the person who cuts their grass saying that tree is
But
healthy.
who received that
And
note?
in the municipal, you know, Kathy Ockman.
Okay, but, so it would be up to that individual to look at that note and put their job on the line to say,
Well,
we
actually,
accept this
it
note.
would have come through, it came back to me through Kathy, it would have had to have come through, that there was a violation written. So, you know,
Well, I think not to get too far-fetched.
one of the guys at Linkus, or whatever, those guys went out and
Yeah.
wrote a violation. The violation was satisfied with that note from the lawn cutter that the tree was fine.
Let me ask you a
Continues
legal
to be.
question. The legal question is, can the township, basically, can you, if something happens, we need the language that allows you to defend. Can you defend the language that we put in?
Well, somebody would have to determine who a qualified individual is, I think.
Well, in order for this
And you have
array
to
to be
put that in
built,
somebody's hands.
in order for this array to be built, it has to come before planning and zoning.
Correct.
So that individual is gonna be our solicitor, who's gonna be our legal leads.
Correct.
And at that point, he's gonna look at that individual,
Correct.
and he's gonna say, what are your qualifications? what makes you a qualified, whether you wanna say professional, however, whatever word you wanna use.
That's right, yeah, I
At
didn't
that
take,
point-
I didn't take that into account, yeah, that's pretty clear.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Because the solicitor's gonna tear them
We don't
Right.
wanna put you all
Correct.
on the firing line for it, and
Neither do
if
we
the
want-
language is there,
Right.
and it boils down, let me just tell you, it's always gonna boil down to the fact that can you defend it for the township? And based on the direction that we're going, yeah.
Yeah.
Because I'll say right now, if they come to my office, I'm not gonna sign off on it.
Right.
Right, this is power generation, this is specifically power generation.
That whole section is power generation, A through D.
Yeah.
All right,
So are we okay
so we're
with
good.
leaving it?
We're okay with that, yes.
We're good, I'm satisfied with what I've heard.
Okay.
Going to page 6, 5.2.3, on temporary buildings, what would be a temporary building?
Shed.
Yeah, anything less than 100 square feet.
Anything less than 100?
You don't
Well,
want
that's
to
a
put a
temporary-
like, Rubbermaid shed, do you?
But if you've got a permanent, you're paying for a permanent shed when you pay your $50.
But it can be moved,
Mhm.
if it doesn't have a footing and foundation.
Well, other townships, temporary, if it's temporary structure or a temporary shed, you pay nothing, you drop it because it can be
Certainly.
removed.
Certainly.
But, from what I've been explained to me here, any shed, temporary or not, that's, you're paying for your permit, it's considered, you gotta draw it on your
If it's under
survey.
100 square feet, you don't.
Oh, okay, well, I'll take that. All right, so that's a shed then.
Mm-hmm.
All right. I was hoping that's what one of you guys would say. Okay, we got 5.2.5. It says all roof-mounted systems shall meet the building setback requirements of the zone in which they are located. But 3.6, the way I read 3.6, doesn't that exclude you if existing non-conformance? It says it'll be considered an expansion of non-conforming structure or use. So that's saying that it must meet the setback requirements of zone in which it must meet setback requirements, but you're saying that, and that's roof mounted, so it's going to be on a house. So the house is not conforming to the setback already. So 3.6 is like the grandfather clause there.
Well,
Isn't it?
Well, I think.
That is under roof-mounted systems, again.
Yeah, it's a little redundant, but we had a discussion of this at planning and zoning, if you were, I think you were there, or maybe it was historic, or where the two may have been married to when we were discussing this before. But the system could not go beyond the roof.
Well, that's in here already, that's also
Right.
in here.
So I think what this is saying is that if it was mounted on a roof.
Right. That's the one right above it,
Right.
that directs that.
So I think that this is saying the same thing.
But does it need to?
So it's a redundant.
So it really doesn't need to be in there though, because you already have 3.6 eliminating it. Okay.
With us having a lot of half-level houses, is this saying that it can't extend onto the neighbor's roof? Because technically it's still one roof, if you look at it.
That could be.
That's the way I look at it.
Should be,
Because I live in a half double, so I know my roof and his roof are
Well, that's
connected.
But that would be a property violation one way or the other, period, right?
Right, but I'm just saying, if you look at it, they could put it right a little over so you get an extra panel if you could, and
But this
this
is
is gonna eliminate that. This is the setback of the dimensions of your roof, of your house.
Well, setback, I'm not, again,
that's
Belton over there.
just my-
Yeah, well, this
Setback
is-
is property setback.
That's
Right,
the way I look at
normally,
it.
and I'm
Right,
thinking
I've never
one
heard of it.
roof, I'm not thinking a half a double like he's talking
I don't even
about.
know what you do in that scenario you're
Yeah,
talking
and,
about.
and maybe that's what this is pointed at, and we
But-
just don't, we're
But
not.
setback is setback is off of a property line,
Yeah,
right?
you know what,
Any
I
other-
don't know what,
Any
I don't
other
know what
way?
a setback is on well, not only that, but on half of a double, if you have a fence between you and your neighbor, which you're allowed to have, what is the setback line if you go for back door, back porch? Is it, the center of your property? So I think that what we're talking about, especially in this township, is kind of a unique situation
But I
when it
think
comes
that's,
to.
isn't that considered a zero property line then at that point? A zero property line, you build right to it, that's why your house is close to the property line. Zero
Yeah.
property line.
But
So,
is it-
Exemption. right off
but
the
we're
bat.
under roof mounted system, so I
But
guess.
Yeah.
What did the
Mounted
planning
systems,
board
and I
say?
think-
We didn't, this is the first time, this wasn't discussed at planning board.
Well, probably, I mean, a good start would be having the planning board, its attorney professional read this and comment, because we're hashing things over that
Absolutely. We can't answer
we
something.
know minimal about, and they may be able to look and say, hey, there may
Well,
be redundancies.
I can
maybe
only do
we
what I
need
can
here.
do.
Well, the other is, I mean, the zoning officer, you know, looking at this, and maybe if we put a question mark next to that, if there's a reason for that, then it stays. If there isn't a reason for that, then you eliminate it.
I put right in the margin there, what about 3.6 grandfather clause and an
Right.
arrow to that?
Right.
You know, and, because I'm calling 3.6 the grandfather clause. 'cause it's not
The majority of the time, I think you're gonna be able to piece together the ordinances, and these things from other towns, but, you know, when you're looking at a town that does have a lot of half doubles, duplexes, you're not gonna be able to, we may have to tweak this thing. So I'd have to agree with the deputy mayor that we should have.
I think you could have Skip and both Tom look at this.
Well, the previous one was sent to the entire planning board.
Right.
We reviewed it, kicked it
Right.
back to council, and then.
And we chewed it up.
Yeah, we
We've
chewed it up.
been just kicking
And
it
this
around. Well,
is
this is a legitimate question, we've been
Yeah.
satisfying all the others, so far this is would you agree this is really the only one so far? But I'm not done. So, we got that, all right, so if you wanna make a note on that, we'll refer that back to the planning board, maybe there might be more. 5.3 is setbacks, height, glare for ground mounted systems. Now, I gotta tell you guys, just as a pure coincidence, I was visiting a church in Florence on Sunday, and right next to the church, in the backyard on the alley, was a carport that was actually a solar thing.
Mhm. It's
So
popular.
it doubles as a solar, you know, and it's a carport, you know, and I drove over to it, and it's clearly higher than 6 feet. Now, Skip Rial told me on residential, you can't have ground mount higher than 6 feet. So I'm a little curious on that, because it was definitely higher than 6 feet.
Now, was it a roof mount on top of a carport?
No, this thing was girders. It was all girded out, and it really neat, nice.
And it acted
It's a
as a
zero
carport.
cost for installation, so it was brand new, the sale sign was still in front of it. Right next to St. Clair Church there in front in Walnut. in
Maybe it's
Florence.
not ground mount, just because it's high doesn't make it ground mount.
A lot of farms,
Yeah.
what they do is they build up over top their farms, build the arrays on top, and then they still can have their cattle and everything
Yep,
raised.
well, that's, first of all, that would
And
be
that's-
residential, would it? That
No,
would be
but
commercial.
I'll give you an
commercial
example,
farm,
so if you
yes.
want this, they're putting them in parking lots.
Mhm.
They're, you know, where you've got
Right.
massive supermarket parking
Right.
lots, or,
Well, we
hotel
thought about it for
parking
here,
lots.
actually, canopy system,
So now you're getting.
years ago. But
So
again,
that's
that's not
not-
residential, and I
But
was,
that's not,
you know.
I
and-
wouldn't consider that a ground mount.
No, it's not.
Well,
ground mount.
our
Touches the ground.
Our thing says here, ground mounted solar systems, height of ground mount system shall be measured from ground level adjacent to the support structure to the highest point, the support structure.
Mhm.
That is definitely the support structure, okay? This thing comes out of the ground, I mean, you know,
I guess
school
it'd
me
be
if I'm
unclear.
deluded, you know, if I'm
Maybe
playing
you could
off.
say that
But-
the stick and mortar of a house, not the foundation, is its connection to the ground.
No
It's not
way.
the roof.
No, that's, we're talking about having a bare piece of ground, a guy coming out, or girl, whatever, with an auger, drilling 4 holes for it, keep it simple, four holes, dropping 4 I-beams in it, and strapping 4 more I-beams, boxing it off, maybe throw 2 more for support, cross support, for a total of 6. Bolting them all together and throwing the solar panels.
Well,
Now,
I
you
guess-
guys, are we saying that that's not ground mount?
Well, I guess.
4 holes drilled in the ground.
I guess-
4 pipes.
Yeah, well, forget ground mount and what is or is not ground. I guess the more important thing is backing up into, why are we limited to 6 feet? Why is 6 feet instead of 8 feet, 10 feet, 9 feet, 11 feet?
What he said.
Well, actually,
It has
Skip said
something to
it
do with
was-
fence height, and people in the backyards don't want to see their neighbor's solar panel in their
It's all
backyard.
aesthetic. for
But
residential.
I would point out that what we have in common with Florence and Roebling is alleys. This thing was off of an alley. It would really be the only conceptual place that you could put this. We have ruled out ground mounts in this document out of the front of homes. So you can't put it in the front, you can't put it on the side. Really, the only location that you could install this would be
In your backyard.
in your backyard off of an alley. But we would have to look at 5.3.4, which is saying it needs to be 15 feet from all property lines. The property line with the township, the street, isn't, that would be considered, and those carports can't, that carport there, for instance, was definitely within 5 feet of the property line, no doubt. They have the same exact situation we have. A lot of row houses, a lot of twins, alley feed, and garages or carports off of the alley. And I think we could address it.
They may have had, I would say we need to take a look at what Florence's ordinance is on that, because you know what, they may say the same thing we say, and they may have come before planning board and said, listen, I need to do this, and they showed the
Do a
possible
variance?
negative criteria, and they got a variance for
Get a
it.
variance?
But back to the key question is, what is the reason for the 6 feet? Is it, and then that's what we really need to discuss.
Well,
is
she
should
said it
we
was
change
for
the 6
aesthetic
feet?
reasons.
Okay, so
Well-
we're saying that we're accepting that your normal fence height that you're allowed is 6 feet in your backyard, if that's the zoning ordinance, and you don't wanna see your neighbors, and we think that that's a good thing, then 6 feet stays. If we think that, 8 foot is reasonable, then it goes from 6 to 8. So I guess backing up, saying, why is it 6 feet versus 8, or 4, or 10, is probably a more reasonable question. So the 6 was just based on a fence height?
But you
Six,
see,
I think is a pretty generic number.
if you look at 5.3.9, there you're dealing with all of the, what we talked about actually when we kicked this around, which was glare and stuff like that. That's all in that. It's saying glint, glare, study, designs constructed in a manner to avoid directing light, directing glare towards adjacent or nearby properties or public roadways. So, they kicked the heck out of all the
I got you.
stop you things.
The higher they are, the less glint and glare you're gonna get, because nobody's gonna see it but an airplane. So
Which is
that's-
also
Which they.
Right,
have
I
to-
got that,
FAA.
but what I'm saying is we're
Right.
stuck on the 6
Right.
foot.
Yeah, they have the glass that's non-glare.
Yeah. So I'm saying the 6 foot kinda would give you more of an opportunity to have glint and glare over your neighbors instead of going up 8 or 10. So why are we stuck on 6 foot? If it's the appearance of it, then that's what we're looking at is,
Well, again, what I'm proposing here is that we take a look at, like Deputy Mayor Falco said, Florence's ordinance, and see if they specifically address this carport thing. That'll make it, if we put language in there that addresses it, it would make it easier. And I thought from the get-go that one of our main intentions here was to make this friendly for
Right.
residential, purposes,
it's
to
good.
avoid LUB,
Right.
land use board,
agreeable.
and
and that's-
professional course.
And that's why I'm saying that the 6 foot may not. It's already gonna be challenging enough to meet all of the other criteria with the lot sizes that we have in town to get these things on the ground. I mean, I think if you're gonna get them in town, from what I'm seeing and what I'm experiencing, they're going on somebody's roof.
Well, this would be the only, if you would agree, I'm not sure, but I would say that, from my knowledge of this town, pretty much the only, for the majority of property, the only possible ground mount you would have would be this carport. Because you got 15 foot needing on each side, your 50-foot lots are the only thing that's gonna, accommodate that.
Yeah, and
you know,
that may be only feeding a garage, an array that small, is probably, is not selling anything back to the grid, it's probably, using
I don't
it.
know, though.
Running a refrigerator,
I-
the TV for Sunday night
Jason,
football.
what kind of square footage, what kind of power would be generated out of something by 12 by 20?
Depends.
You could get something decent on it.
It all depends because all the panels have to be facing in the south direction. The best angle is 22 to 26 degrees. And
It needs to be
and-
sunny.
No obstruction.
And then the problem I had was with 538, the scenery. Now, company's gonna come in, they're gonna give you an overview of your ground, where you're gonna put them. I'm sure you've dealt with it.
Yeah.
They have the machine, they come out, they take a picture of it, they do an overview with the shadows. And trees gotta come down, limbs have to come down, so you can collect as much sunlight to make it beneficial for you, because you're not gonna waste all this money if you're not gonna produce nothing. So, I mean, one cell blocked,
The production value
production
right out the
value
window,
dropped,
right?
yeah, it's down. I mean, you drive around to the telephone poles and see all the ones that they mounted on. They only mounted them on there because they had to.
Yeah.
They didn't care where they were put, you
$200,000
got lights over
a year,
top
why
of
not?
them. They didn't care nothing about it. They were told they had to put them up, they put them up. So, I mean, to say that we have to have
$215,000 a unit.
evergreen plants, the maximum height is the maximum height at the top of the panels, so you're now gonna be, you know, you put a panel on the ground, and you got a tree above it, it's gonna cast a shadow, and you're not gonna be producing. So there would have to be a setback on the scenery, and I know, sitting on the planning board, they like to talk about plants, sorry. Sat there for hours talking about plants.
Drought-resistant evergreen plants, it says right there, consists of native drought-resistant, just throwing it out.
Yeah.
But, you know, so maybe the planning board could look at the ground-mounted, as far as the carport thing, maybe put the ordinance as Florence.
Or who's to say, we can't just say that it's a carport, it's above a certain height, but it's on a structure? Who's to say that's a ground mount? Why can't we change the definition of what a ground mount would be?
Well,
I'm inclined to think that those aren't ground mounts.
that's
On top of
something.
I
a,
personally don't think they are.
I think
Oh,
they're,
okay.
I think they're panels on, I think they're now selling roof panels that go, that
They're
is,
shingles.
yeah, that are
Shingles,
now
yeah.
roof.
Yeah, shingles.
Instead of putting it on my roof, you would remove my roof
Right.
and put these panels
Yeah.
on.
Yeah, they've had that for a while, they're expensive,
Yeah,
yeah.
they're expensive. They also
Exactly,
have
but it
skylights that
prevents
are-
your roof from leaking.
They have
Well, there's-
skylights that are
Well,
solar
there's- they
panels.
look like metal roofing too, there's one, didn't Kent do one over
Well,
on
there's-
Washington Street?
I-
Washington Road?
So what I'm saying is that they may be selling a carport that is coming with its own panels to light the carport and then some
Right.
accessories in the house.
So maybe ground mount is just the semantic, we don't need to use ground mount versus, let's just look at the fact that there's gonna be more people using and buying these things. And I think aesthetically, we may all of a sudden find ourselves 4 or 5 years from now saying, well, 6 foot, 7 foot, I don't really mind, cause I'm saving X amount of dollars. So maybe we should focus on the facility itself, not the ground mount versus.
Because I think in order for you to do a carport, if it's permanent,
Right.
you're then gonna have to come in for a permit that's gonna require zoning, and then a building permit, and that's gonna have the setbacks, and that's gonna, then you're gonna have a
You're
design.
not gonna be user friendly.
It's not express track at that point, basically,
Exactly,
right? Okay.
exactly.
All right.
So
Actually,
I
I
think-
put
I
one of
think
these
we're-
things on myself,
Yeah.
you know?
Well, you know, give it,
Not
give it
even
a
myself.
No,
Give it a
you
moment.
can't.
Well, why
The
not?
state will not allow you to put a solar panel on yourself.
Yeah,
Really?
Yep.
at this point, no.
Well,
You have to be by a qualified electrician.
How about if I get one just to sign off on?
Your house burns down, it's his
Alright.
license.
Okay.
All right.
Hey, Mr. Lawmaker, watch it, you're on the record.
I'm just letting you know. I took the solar ordinance class.
I thought that smack in
I have
your
a
hand
whole
might have been
book
enough
in-
for you.
I thought that that was a legal procedure that you could do.
Would you like to
Somebody
say it?
come in and inspect your work and sign off on it.
I thought that smack on your hand might have been enough.
All right. That's what the heating and air guys tell me all the time, that's what they do. So, not that they've done anything
Hey,
right.
I've seen it where a contractor comes in, they bid a solar